What if you died and got a second chance? I mean, really think about it. Imagine living a life with no real purpose, just floating along. And then, in one split second of pure courage, it's all over. But what if that end was actually the beginning?
Well, for one man, that's exactly what happened. This is his story. The story of a guy who gets the ultimate do-over. His pretty aimless life gets cut short by one selfless act, and suddenly, he's reborn into a world of swords, magic, and yeah, some very strange new rules. So, today, we're going to dive deep into the epic first volume of The Conqueror from a Dying Kingdom. And trust me, it's a story that kicks off with an ending and then builds into something absolutely incredible.
All right, so our story, it doesn't start with some big explosion or grand battle. Nope. It begins with the quiet sadness of a life that's just not being lived.
So we meet our main character, and honestly, he's in a pretty bad place. He's unemployed, totally unmotivated. His life is just going nowhere, you know? He even says his days have the sweet yet putrid odor of rotting fruit. Man, that's a perfect way to describe a life of wasted potential, right?
But then, everything changes. One single moment just shatters all that apathy. He sees a little girl. She falls from a bridge into this raging river below. And right then, in that instant, a guy who had nothing to lose, who had no purpose, suddenly finds one. He jumps.
And he saves her. He manages to push her toward the riverbank just as his own strength completely gives out. The cold water just takes him. His life is over. Or so he thinks. Because instead of oblivion, he finds himself just floating.
It's this peaceful, endless slumber. His mind is all dull and blurry. It's a feeling, he says, that could last forever. But then, all of a sudden, this intense pressure just shatters the peace, and it all comes to a very abrupt end.
And just like that, he wakes up as a newborn baby. But get this, all his past memories are still there. And this new world, it is so different. People have these pointed, furry ears. His new parents, Rook and Suzuya, they're part of this well-known family, the Ho family, and he's got a new name, Yuri.
Okay, so this is where things get really interesting. Remember, Yuri has all his old memories. So on the outside, he's a baby, but on the inside, he's got the mind of a full-grown adult. And yeah, that makes him a prodigy right from the get-go. He learns the language super fast and is constantly shocking his parents with just how smart he is for his age.
And this new world he's in, it's straight up fantasy. His dad, Rook, runs this ranch that breeds these incredible creatures. You've got these huge ostrich-like things called plane runners for getting around on land, and then you have massive king eagles that knights actually ride into battle. I mean, can you imagine seeing that as a kid? It's pretty clear his old, boring life is long gone.
But, this perfect childhood, it gets shattered by tragedy. Word comes from the battlefield. The head of the Ho family, Yuri's own uncle, has been killed in action.
And just like that, a crisis explodes. A council is called to figure out who's in charge now. But then this treacherous guy named Rakunu shows up with a forged will, trying to seize power for himself. The whole family is thrown into complete chaos.
So this is Yuri's first real test, and his solution? Oh, it's brilliant. Remember, he looks like a kid, but he's thinking like an adult. He plays the long game. He actually pretends to support the traitor, Rakunu, and gives him this specially prepared parchment for his new will. And Rakunu, being all arrogant and power-hungry, he walks right into the trap. So when the time comes, at the council meeting, they hold the parchment up to a flame, and Yuri's invisible ink appears, revealing one word: fake. The whole plot is exposed, right in front of everyone. You can just feel the traitor's rage, but it's too late. His entire scheme is ruined.
Okay, so the political threat is handled. You'd think the Ho family could finally catch a break, right? Wrong. A new enemy arrives, and this one, well, you can't outsmart it with a clever trick. A deadly plague called sorepox starts to sweep through the land, and you can't exactly reason with a plague.
But Yuri recognizes the symptoms immediately. To him, this is smallpox. And this is where we see the real power of his reincarnation. In a world that runs on tradition and folklore, he brings modern science to the table. He knows the cure isn't some magic herb. It's a weaker, related disease called cowpox. So he introduces the whole concept of inoculation, basically creating a vaccine, and saves his people with knowledge from a world they can't even imagine.
So, let's recap.
He saved his family from political ruin and a deadly plague. At this point, Yuri's reputation as a child prodigy is totally sealed. So what's next? Well, it's time for him to step onto a much bigger stage, the famous Knight Academy.
So at just 10 years old, Yuri heads off to the capital to enroll. And he doesn't just get in, he absolutely crushes the grueling entrance exam, getting the #1 score.
And of course, the Academy brings a whole new cast of characters into his life, people who are going to shape his future. He pretty quickly makes friends with this guy Malo, another really sharp kid, but he also makes a powerful rival, the fiery and pretty arrogant Princess Carol. She just cannot stand being second best to him. And if that wasn't enough, he also has to deal with his roommate, Dala, this brutish guy who tries to bully him, which turns out to be a very, very bad idea.
But, the drama of school life, it's quickly overshadowed by some real mortal danger lurking in the city's dark alleyways. So Yuri's out exploring the capital, and he sees something shocking. He sees his rival, Princess Carol, being violently dragged into an alley. She's being kidnapped by a bunch of thugs.
Thinking fast, Yuri does something crazy. He gets himself captured too. He figures it's the only way he can make sure she survives. Using this tiny little saw he had hidden in his sleeve, he cuts their ropes and leads this daring escape through the city. Suddenly, these two rivals, they have to rely on each other just to stay alive.
And an experience like that, it changes everything. All that animosity between them, it's just gone. It's replaced by this grudging respect and maybe, just maybe, the start of a real friendship. It's kind of funny how a near-death experience and a really good meat pie can bring two rivals together.
So think about it. Yuri has survived death itself, outsmarted a traitor, and stopped a plague. And now, he's earned the trust of a princess. But in a kingdom filled with political games, an alliance like that is a double-edged sword. A princess's trust can be a powerful weapon, but what new enemies is it going to attract?
Plot Casio